what to look for when you're trying to find a knife to learn how to sharpen with. And I think this knife right here, the CJRB Pyrite Light, is basically a perfect example of what you might want to buy if you're trying to learn how to freehand sharpen. So let's get into the reasons why. Number one, we'll start with the price. These are 29 bucks, very inexpensive. So most people can get one and not have to worry too much about it if you mess it up or anything like that. It'll make for a great utilitarian EDC knife, as well as being very easy to sharpen. And at the price point, you don't have to worry too much about it if you do mess up the edge. So that's number one, the price. Number two is the blade shape. So this is a alternative Wharncliffe style blade. Most Wharncliffes have a straight edge that's perfectly straight like this, and this has a little bit of belly and a very outstretched tip to it, which you don't see quite as much on a lot of Wharncliffes. But this style of blade right here, along with a lot of sheep's foots and reverse tontos and leaf-shaped blades, is one of the easiest style of blades to sharpen. And the reason being is because it matches the natural movement of your arm when you're freehand sharpening. So just for example, let me grab a stone. So if I'm sharpening this, generally I'm locking my wrist in place, hold my angle on the stone, and I'm starting at the top, and I drag the knife across, and as I'm going I slowly raise my elbow to get to the tip, and then I stop raising, get to the end of the stone, and go back, lower my elbow a little bit, and then I just go back and forth like that. And this knife is super easy to sharpen because you don't have to hold it perfectly still. It's not a straight edge, so you don't have to match that straightness all the way across. You can just kind of naturally drag it back and forth, slightly raising and lowering your elbow as you go in both kind of directions, So this is the easiest blade shape in the world to sharpen, and especially because it's so small, it's very easy to deal with. So that's one of the main reasons why I think this is the best edge to learn to sharpen with. And then as you get more experienced, you can start to learn to sharpen something with a little bit more belly, where you have to raise the tip up more and kind of get a feel for all that. And especially like a straight spine knife with a real big amount of upswept, it gets a little more difficult. It's not hard, but it's a lot more difficult than sharpening something like this. So this is the best choice. Next thing is the sharpening choil, or finger choil in this case. You can see where the plunge grind ends right here, right before the start of the handle. So that grind starts way back here in front of the edge. So there's no issues when getting into the front of the edge when you're sharpening on this knife, unlike some of the other knives on the market. As you can see, this plunge grind is tapered, and the plunge grind itself doesn't start behind the edge. It starts right at the edge. So when I sharpen this knife, you see how it creates that little ramp at the very end of the edge? That's because the material is getting thicker right there at the end of the edge. It's running into that tapered plunge grind. And what happens is it creates that smile, but it also makes the knife itself more difficult to sharpen, because what happens is when you get to that point, it raises the edge up off the stone like this and causes you to cut in to the edge up here more and not cut at all back here, because it's raised up off the rest of the edge, which can really mess up your sharpening, make it difficult, make your edge look like shit. So this is not the kind of style. I'm not hating on this knife, but you want to look out for this if you're trying to learn how to sharpen. This is going to make it much more difficult for you. Now you can always extend that choil there so you don't have to worry about it, but you might not know how to do that either if you're a beginner sharpener. So you might want to avoid that style of edge. So that's the thing. And then the steel. This steel, 9CR 18 MOV, basically a spray form version of that. That's what we've learned that AR RPM 9 is, thanks to Knife Steel Nerds and their research. So this is a it's a decently wear resistant steel, but much less so than something like M390 or 10V, some of the other crazy steels on the market. You'll be able to cut this steel fairly easily with most stones on the market, even my little Arkansas stone right here can hone this knife really well. And it was clean before I started using it. You can see how much steel it's taken off of this edge. So pretty easy steel to cut. It's usually ran between 58 and 60 HRC, so nothing crazy. Harder than a lot of the knives that are on the market, but still relatively easy to cut, and most stones, if not all stones, will cut the steel pretty well. So that's another thing. I think that's about it. So those are a few reasons why this knife and other knives like it are a really great choice to learn to freehand sharpen with. Yeah, everything about this is just about perfect for a beginner to learn how to sharpen. The price, the steel, the shape of the blade, the sharpening choil the way that it is, chef's kiss in terms of learning to sharpen as a beginner, specifically freehand sharpening. But even using a guided system or anything like that, still going to be easier to sharpen this type of knife than a lot of the other ones on the market. So just thought I would share that with you guys. If you want to see more knives that are like this, that are good beginner, cheap knives that you can learn how to sharpen easily with, let me know in the comments and I'll show you some more.